guaranteed to be. Oh, I found it.
If you just joined us, we just started the live stream. Abe was on a treacherous journey. He had 100 and what did you say, 120 tabs open, and one of them playing music. It's scary.
I'll tell you.
Scary position to be in for a webinar.
Yeah. Let's see. So I'm currently at 174 tabs, which is pretty standard. So what I usually try to do is I have a good computer. It's a whatever is the current Mac Mini, and it runs really well. But what ends up happening is every once in a while, Chrome makes it slow down just because it's like that many tabs. So I like to restart my computer right before I ever go live. And inevitably, today is the day that one of the tabs had a YouTube video in it that decided to autoplay as I'm restarting. So I had to like manually dig and find it.
It's probably an IntentWise YouTube video that you're watching, I'm sure.
Guaranteed, yes.
Yes.
But all good now.
Well, glad to have you. And thank you to everybody who's already tuned in. Looks like we've got a healthy number of attendees watching already. So thank you. Yeah, and we're also live streaming on LinkedIn and YouTube right now. So if you're watching from those channels, hello. Let us know how it's coming through on your end. The format for today is going to be a little bit different, guys. So we don't have a formal slide presentation, right, Abe? Or did you end up putting anything together?
No, I put something together.
You have a slide presentation.
I put it as the basis for a more full conversation. But yes, sure. I got some stuff together.
All right. So while we're getting that loaded up here, guys, I'll start with some logistics for how we're going to run this conversation. Main topic that we're going to start with is, auditing accounts, and there's many situations you might find yourself in where you're having your account audited or you are doing it yourself. And so we're going to talk through some of those scenarios, what you should be looking for, how we handle the process, and should provide a intriguing conversation that way. But as we're going through it, if you have other questions or things that you want to double click on, maybe that we covered too quickly, let us know in the comments. Just send your feedback through. We'll address that. We'd like to make this an engaging conversation. And so before we jump off, I guess what we'll do here is I'll introduce myself and IntentWise, then I'll let Abe introduce himself and his company XP Strategy, and then we can go from there. So IntentWise, quick backstory about us. We are a software provider. We work with hundreds of the largest agencies and brands that sell on Amazon and Walmart. We also support Instacart and Criteo, and we offer 3 main software applications and services to help you grow your business in e-commerce. The first being Ad Optimizer, IntentWise Ad Optimizer. That is a ads management platform that allows you to use AI and sophisticated rules engine to change bids across all of those retail media platforms and optimize towards your specific ROAS goal. We have IntentWise Analytics Cloud, which is our out-of-the-box end-to-end reporting solution, connects to all of the major APIs from Amazon, Walmart, Instacart, and Criteo, and downloads all of that data for you, puts it together, stitches it together, and actually makes it accessible to build reports and to know all of the things happening in your business. And then our latest release is IntentWise Explore, which is an application built on top of Amazon Marketing Cloud, which allows you to run queries and build audiences for DSP using just the point of your mouse, point and click of your mouse, as opposed to writing the SQL queries yourself. So if you're interested in learning more, check out our website. We have a bunch of videos on there, a bunch of content about what we do, and would be happy to give you a demo. That out of the way, Abe, tell us about XP Strategy and how you got involved in Amazon.
Oh boy, so much to say. So I think we have a pretty significant overlap of audience. So I think that a lot of people have heard my story maybe once or more than once, but of course we'll do it again. So for those of you that don't know me, my name is Abe Shamali. I manage Amazon advertising for sellers and for brands. I have had my agency since 2018. But my selling history goes back a bit farther than that. So I've been selling since 1991. We first started selling out of print advertisements in the back of magazines. Of course, as the world started turning, the internet turned into a thing. We started advertising on Yahoo stores and our own websites. And as marketplaces grew and shrank and progressed and developed, we went through all of them, ending up, of course, at Amazon. In 2018, I had the opportunity to lean into the part of running a business that I liked best, which was the advertising. And that was the birth of an agency. And here we are today.
Amazing. So, Abe, what kind of clients do you work with usually? Could you describe? Obviously, it seems to be primarily Amazon businesses. Maybe like what kind of sizes are you working with? Do you have a specific niche that works best for you?
So the niche I work most commonly with, it's going to sound like it's a very wide space, but actually it's pretty, they do have a lot in common, are typically brands doing anywhere from 70, $80,000 all the way up to about $2.5 million a month. They, although it is a very large number spread, the reality is that running a business in that size range is pretty similar. At that point, you have gotten a hold of lots of what works on Amazon, as opposed to the randomness of just having an Amazon shop. And it's really a question of doing it more times a day or fewer times a day. Having 1,000 units of a SKU instead of 100 units of a SKU is really the biggest difference between those.
Right.
Of course, there are still differences. It's not as simple as just, adding an extra zero to every PO and then all of a sudden you're 10 times as big. It's not as simple as that, but the reality of what they need, there is a lot in common with it. So that tends to be the place where we land in terms of the brands we work with. And we work with both brands and sellers. I guess the difference is the brand is typically the entity that is manufacturing a product themselves and wants a direct connection with the marketplaces where things are selling. And sellers are typically one layer removed, one or more layers removed from the manufacturing process. They might be wholesalers, they might be distributors, they might be arbitrage sellers. There's all different ways of handling merchandise, and that falls into the broad category of seller. So we do work with both.
Yeah. And it's interesting because this is what we were talking about a little bit last week in terms of the foundations, right? It's like whether you're making $70,000 a month in revenue or $2 million a month in revenue, the foundations that get you there are the same. And even at that level, $2, $3, $4 million a month, 80, 90% of your revenue from ads is still probably going to be on the sponsored products, sponsored brands, the foundation, the basic stuff that every brand has to do correctly.
Oh yeah. I mean, I've if you've worked with Amazon reps for brands, one of the things they can give you is anonymized reports on what your brand's competition is doing. And it really was shocking to me the first time I saw one of those reports. Every single competitor, they break down the ratio of sales between ad type, sponsored products, 89, 91, 92%, which was always surprising to me the first time I saw it, because if you didn't know anything and you just lived in the world of social media and you just lived based on what people posted, you would think that like DSP and sponsored brands is like 94% of the sales. All the sales are coming from that banner across the top. It's so clever. It's such a great display. Look at this big image. Or you look at DSP. Look what we did with this targeting. Look what we did with all these things. The reality is those might be important components, but in the end, even for large brands, they very frequently are like 10% of your sales overall.
Yeah.
They are the interesting 10%. They are the 10% where creativity, where projections, and where larger marketplace plays come into things. Top of funnel and middle of funnel, all those are different from what sponsored products does. But in the end, the actual unit contribution is very frequently much smaller. Of course, there's exceptions. Of course, there's all different scenarios that someone is going to pipe up with, and they're going to say, well, for me, it's different. But no, in general, the SKU is 90% sponsored products in any Amazon seller account.
Yeah. And I think it's worth noting that, DSP and AMC and these other tools, sponsored brands, even sponsored display, they are effective at a particular part of the funnel, which is refilling the funnel from the top, right? That's why they're called generally upper funnel campaigns. Maybe not sponsored brands, that kind of is somewhere in the middle, but DSP is really effective if you're already doing 5, 10, 15 million a month in sales. You're spending everywhere that you possibly could on search, but you want to continue growing. You need to go upper funnel. And to your point, it's never going to create 80 or 90% of your sales, but it's going to push more people into the sponsored products funnel, which is going to ultimately capture that demand. And to your point, Abe, like, I've shared this data previously. I've shared it on LinkedIn. So, if you follow me, you might have seen this already, but IntentWise has run the same analysis across all of our accounts anonymously. And we have billions of dollars of Amazon ad spend coming through our system every year. The numbers hold true. I think it was 83% of spend goes to sponsored products, and it was over 90% of revenue, ads revenue, that comes back through sponsored products as well.
Right. So the anonymized data that Amazon might give me for 3 accounts really scales up almost exactly to billions of dollars in spend across thousands of accounts.
That's right. So, Abe, should we jump into the slide deck first and then get into the conversation, or should we set the stage in terms of audits before we get into the slides?
So the audit was sort of designed to walk through the idea, but I'll queue it up and then we'll start the presentation, and I guess we can go from there.
Cool.
So you and I, when we first hatched the idea of doing this, we tossed around a few things we could talk about. One of the challenges I always have compared to what I see as my peers is I don't have the blaring headline of 11 things to do to rocket your sales. I can't wrap my brain around how to do a thing like that. So when you first came to me and said, "Hey, Abe, we'd like to do something," I'm like, I love talking and I love you guys and I love Srinath specifically, but like I don't have a thing. So
the secret sauce.
Right. I don't have a thing. So you and I spoke about a few different options. We spoke about challenges that we typically have to address. We spoke about things that brands and sellers work on and work through. And we sort of said it might be good to have a discussion about audits, what our audits look like, what people should want and see and expect when they talk about an audit. It seems to be a popular thing these days in which everybody is talking about audits. We did an audit on this brand, or we'll do an audit for you,
Right.
or this is what we found. This seems to be a common theme these days, but it doesn't get discussed a lot except for the word itself. So we said, let's talk about it in a little bit of depth. And what was interesting was you and I spoke last week. I mean, when we were queuing this up, we spoke last week about it, and we have experienced almost exactly the same things, even though we go at Amazon from a little bit different directions. You're going to at it from a software side and from a provider side. I'm doing it on the level of working directly with brands and sellers. But what we experience and what we see is really, really similar. So that spurred us to think that we're going on the right path of a thing to talk about. And that led us to right now.
100%. And I think the other thing that I'll just add to that conversation, and what I found was interesting, is that different approaches can lead to the same result. And so whether that's a different approach in the strategy and how you interpret that during the audit, or whether that's a different approach of doing the audit itself, what we hope to discuss today and get down into the weeds of is, what are the elements that make an audit meaningful, and how should you interpret that? And what are the elements, also of a strategy that you can see and know sort of as you're going through the audit, whether or not that's part of your success.
Exactly. All right. So yes, it's exactly where we went. And we tossed around the idea of just talking because we were able to just have a conversation as long as this is expected to be. But I did throw together a few slides at least, so it can be a little bit of support for people who like to read things, I guess. There are people who think visually. There are people who like to hear things. And I guess we can have something for everybody with this little presentation.
TikTok has destroyed our minds. We need three or four pieces of information on screen at all times.
Oh gosh, every time I see somebody talking about an uninformed thing, like a lot of times people will talk about a complex subject and reduce it to a sentence that has nothing behind it. I'm like, I can't argue with someone that gets their information from TikTok. And like, I'll just write that and it will almost always be the end of the conversation because they actually did get their information from TikTok.
Right. Can't trust
So
TikTok.
yeah, its purpose, it has a space. Deep information, no. Random dancing people, yes.
Yes. Entertainment,
Yeah,
yes. Facts, probably
exactly.
probably better places to check.
Many better, everywhere's better to check than that. Yes. All right, so let's get into it. Um, I think the first thing to do is share my screen, right? There's a little button that says present down there. And I
Yeah.
imagine that's a screen sharing button.
Let's give it a try. You never know what will happen.
All right. Let's see. Of course. So I clicked share screen and it asked me if I want to share a tab. And inevitably, it is showing me the entire list
List
of
of tabs.
172 tabs to scroll through. So you might want to put a commercial break right now while
Yeah,
I scroll
guys,
through all of those.
let us know in the chat how many tabs you have open. I guarantee nobody beats Abe right now.
There is somebody that beats me. I shared a story a few weeks ago of somebody that has like 7,700 tabs open.
What?
And he has them open in Firefox. And apparently, Firefox is a system in which any unopened, any tab that's not being looked at that moment just lays completely dormant. It takes no
So
memory
it
or
just
no
stores the
anything at
URL
all.
basically.
Right. So you can actually have a whole history of your life as open tabs, and that's what this person does.
Wow.
And yes, it's pretty crazy.
There's some engineer at Mozilla somewhere right now looking at the logs, wondering who has 7,700 open tabs and
Oh yeah.
hasn't crashed their app yet.
No, they're super proud of themselves. Okay, let's see. I'm still not finding it, and they need a search here. We might have to go to like a nuclear option, although I'm not sure what the nuclear option is, but we'll find it.
We'll find it. You can if you have the link, you can send it to me and I can always pull it up.
Oh, that's an interesting option. All right. Give me like 5 more seconds.
Sure.
And we'll get there.
It's always fun. We switched to StreamYard, and so I actually don't know half the time when the screen share is going to work, what it's going to look like. We're just going to figure it out as we go.
I've been pretty good, and this is generally not the way it goes, but that's what makes life interesting. All right, so I'm going to send you the link. Where should I send it to you?
Anywhere,
yeah.
LinkedIn, whatever's easy. I've got
So
it all.
There's actually, yeah, I just sent it to you within this app here.
Beautiful. Okay. All right. There we go.
There we
Hopefully
go.
everybody can see that. You see it on your end, Abe?
I do see it on my end. Is there a way for me to advance it myself, or should I just like poke you whenever it's time for the next slide?
You can just make some crazy gesture and I'll know.
All right, perfect. Oh boy, but you're watching the slides instead of me. So, all right, let's see if we can manage through this. So, as you can see from the actual first slide, the presentation is called Audits with Abe. And what we want to discuss is the nuts and bolts of an audit, when to make an audit, why somebody might want an audit, and are they actually useful? So that's what we're going to talk about today. And the next slides are going to support that. Usually presentations start with a about me, but I think we sort of covered that like 7 minutes ago. Like the slide says, I started existing in the world of not school in 1991. A bunch of things happened between 91 and 2024, and here we are today. I think we don't need to revisit it all a second time.
Awesome.
So when I make a presentation, I like to start at the foundation of what we're discussing and dig a little bit deeper. So the first place to start is simply, what is a PPC audit? Simply put, it is a review of an account. If somebody is selling on Amazon, somebody has a business, it is a review of an account. And in the course of that review, we want to accomplish several things. The first thing we want to do, of course, is we want to find ways to improve campaign performance. Campaign performance is measured a bunch of ways. And in the course of improving campaign performance, a major component is the dollars that go into it. None of this happens for free. It all happens with spend, and you want to use that money as effectively as possible. Whatever your goal is, there are different ways to use the money, but we want to identify if it's happening correctly. And separately from identifying ad spend is identifying opportunities for growth. So some people might have a goal for their ad spend to be more efficient, in which we are happy with selling $10 a month or $1,000 a month or $1 million a month. We're happy with that amount of business, but we think we pay too much to get that amount of business. Find us a way to get that business while spending less. One way that goes for ad efficiency. And the other thing that people try to identify is how to grow. So they'll say, listen, my competition sells this amount. I sell 1/3 of this amount. I know them. I know their product. I'm not different. Why are my sales different? And we try to find that out with a PPC audit. Although, as you'll see, just like that question is broad, what we need to get to is a bit more broad than what the PPC audit is.
Right.
So next slide. The first thing we start off with is, or the second thing we start off is, when should you run an audit? In theory, you can run an audit every morning, and the other opposite is you never run an audit. But there are two typical times where people I'm speaking with will want a review of their account that's in depth. The first time is with that little stormy weather icon. When something is wrong, that's when you look closely. Essentially, if something is not working right, ad costs have gone up, sales have gone down, you have never been able to get traction. Something is really different than you think it should be. That's the time to dig in closely. So that's the very obvious time. That's time number one. That's when people usually come to me. And the other time is when things are running well, but you feel like you might need an oil change. So your car runs perfectly, you hit a certain amount of miles, it's time to just check the tires, make sure everything is running smoothly, and make sure that you can keep doing that same thing. And that's going to be a time where we'll look at all of the metrics that are running right and see if they are off by a percentage point here, a percentage point there, if maybe a couple of elements are bumping into each other. That doesn't look too bad today, but has the potential to give you a headache later. A lot of times people will launch a new product. They'll find that the marketing bumps into the product that existed already. And although it doesn't necessarily reflect in metrics, it's a thing to pay attention to. So that's the thing, there's a million ways to find things that have the potential to be an issue, and we like to look at that periodically. One of the things we do internally is once or twice a year, depending on the account, once or twice a year, we will cross audit accounts within our agency. So what we'll typically do is we will divide up our accounts with PPC specialists that are different than the ones touching an account. We'll say, hey, do an audit without knowing who manages this account and tell me what you see. And we'll tell them to pick it apart. And when they pick it apart in an anonymized way, I mean, they sort of do know everybody knows who's handling what account. But when you have the opportunity to look at it with fresh eyes, you will almost always find things that can be done a little bit better. I would love to say that 0% of things are ever found when you look at an account. That's also completely unrealistic. There will always be a thing that could be done better. There will always be a little bit of data that has been shifting over time, but is acceptable within the way an account runs. So if you have a target ACOS of 30% and ACOS is 30.22%, you will not burn down the building trying to fix that 0.22%, but somebody that looks at it with fresh eyes might say, hey, this was 28%, then 29%, then 30%, then 30.22. There is a creep there, but you'll see it only with fresh eyes as opposed to living in it all the time, So those are the kinds of things you look at when you are just fine tuning an account.
And I think that's really important point to pay attention to, which is that for a fresh set of eyes, an experienced specialist or account manager or strategist looking at your account is always going to be able to find things to point out, either areas of opportunity, things you maybe are not doing according to best practice. That's very easy to do. And you have to know your own account at that same level to be able to understand why certain decisions were made when they were, why your account is responding the way it is, so that you know how important those findings are when they're brought to you. If agencies are doing audits and presenting you with all these findings and there's red flags everywhere and things are not working according to the way the agency says they should, you should really take a second to consider how they got to that conclusion, what they know about your business compared to the partner you're working with already.
Oh yeah, I mean, one of the things that I do as part of my business is consulting, just straight consulting, in which people retain me and use me for hours at a time, even if I'm not managing their business. And they'll typically want an outside set of eyes to look at their account. And invariably, what they want me to do is keep an eye on the work that their existing agency does. The existing agency is all right, but they're not 100% sure because they don't live that life. And invariably, I find things that are off. Now, every time I find a thing that's off, I immediately qualify it by saying, listen, this is a thing to ask a question about.
Right.
Don't go to them and rip them a new orifice. That's not necessarily appropriate. There might be a reason. They might have started doing a thing on day 1. They bolted on a part on day 2. They ran an experiment on day 3. And today there is 4 campaigns where we think there should be 1. But if they walk you through that process, you see why it fits, and performance is all right. So you don't need to burn down the building to get back to 0.2 of a percentage point better. Yeah. So we'll find things. Now, there are other times where everything is a train wreck and you almost don't realize it. I'm working with a brand right now. They work with an agency that's much larger than mine, a very prominent one. If you look at their account, you would say everything is great. They have a 28% ACOS. They have a TACOS across the account, which is at 8 or 9%. But one of the things we did as we started to dig into the account is we realized about 1/3 of their SKUs are losing money and 2/3 of their SKUs are fabulously profitable. So when you upload a cost of goods file into your metrics, everything still looks great. But once you start to look at things line by line, everything is like, whoa. And in some cases, it didn't even have to do with the advertising necessarily. Ads might be all right, but they were pricing the products wrong. Literally, the price they sold the product for was losing money even before you spent 5 cents on ads. But a PPC audit will not necessarily find that. An account discussion will find that. The PPC audit will say, hey, this SKU has a good ACOS, a good TACOS. We're hitting on all your metrics. Perfect. It doesn't realize you're losing money.
Auditing accounts is not black and white on Amazon, which I think is what we're saying here. Context is so important to understand the strategy that's trying to be implemented, then to see if you go back, is that strategy being implemented the way that it was originally thought of or described? And it's not black and white. You can't say, oh, they put this keyword in this campaign, that's wrong. I don't think there's probably any situation in which it is possible to distill it down to right or wrong on Amazon. It's all about situational context. It's all about what is the goal for this specific campaign, this specific keyword. And is it achieving that goal, whether it's to drive sales, get conversions on the listing, drive people to your brand store, whatever that case may be? It's not black and white. And so knowing and having appropriate goals for each of those layers before you go in and start doing the audit, or before you ask an agency to do that audit, is going to be super critical to your understanding and interpretation of it.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that actually comes up in the first stages of an audit is when you ask that first question of what do you think should be happening?
Yeah.
Turns out a lot of times that there is no strategy at all. It's just
Right.
like I sell a thing and I run an ad and I want one and two to make me money. And that's it. There is no thoughtfulness about where to prioritize, and all the words that we use to focus our work are all missing from the thought process. And when we start to have to add them in, everything becomes much more interesting. Everything starts to move in directions.
Right.
So let's slide over to the next slide, and we'll get into like more of audits in a specific detail. So once you've decided that you want an audit, whether things are good, bad, somewhere in the middle, you're bored, um, whoever is going to do your audit for you, whether it's somebody internally, if you have a large or sophisticated company, or if you get somebody externally to do it, you're going to get something back. Now, when we say, what does an audit look like? Typically, an audit will show the data in your account, and it is rearranged in a bunch of ways from what Amazon normally gives us. Normally, when you go into Amazon, they have a bunch of screens in which some information is presented, but most of the information is hidden in a bunch of downloads reports that are available. And they don't have one master report that includes everything. They have certain data that has to do with ads. They have certain data that has to do with overall sales. They have certain data that has to do with other metrics that connect the two. You might have to pull 3, 4, 5 reports in order to get a clear picture. What an audit does is it pulls those reports, it merges them, it assembles them into data that is much more connected and gives you a much clearer picture than you'll get from clicking around sellercentral.amazon.com. So typically you'll get ratios, you'll get metrics, you'll get trends. A metric is today's number. Today's number is X for the past 30 days. The ratio is you have number one, metric number 2. This is what they look like compared to each other, and this is good, bad, or needs thoughtfulness. And of course, a trend is I can see what something is today, but if I look at what it was yesterday, or if I look at what it was for the same period a year ago, what is the direction that metric is moving? And that's much more insightful than looking at today's number. Today's number might be, say it's a little bit worse than you'd like. If the reality is that a year ago it was a complete train wreck, you've actually been moving in very much the right direction, and you're almost at the threshold of being where you want to be. That's completely different than looking at a number and saying, oh, this is not good. We like it to be 4% better than this. So knowing the direction that things are moving is going to be part of what you want to get out of an audit.
Yeah.
The deliver.
Sorry, just to add to your first point here, I think this is actually a really important way to think about an audit, which is your data sliced and diced in different ways. The levels and the layers at which you're doing this is the entire point of running the audit. It's not to Abe's earlier point. I think you said it's like there are, maybe at the surface level, everything looks fine until you drill down one layer deeper, and maybe everything still looks fine. And you keep drilling down until finally 3, 4, 5 levels deep, you start to see opportunities. That's what you're doing with an audit. So starting at the base, what is that most granular view? Maybe it's the search term report, right? You have to pull one for sponsored products. You have to pull another one for sponsored brands. You have to pull something else for sponsored display. You have to get your total business sales. You have to pull a child business report. You have to get your inventory levels. You can see where we're going. You've probably done this yourself to an extent, right? You're pulling all of these different numbers, deciding how to join them together. But ultimately what you're trying to do is look at those different layers of your account from the highest to the lowest. Where is every single cent going? And are there pockets of optimization hiding somewhere within these layers?
Yeah, I mean, if you go to the next slide, I actually dive into that a little bit.
There you
And
go.
yes, so this is a list of the kinds of things that should show up in an audit. And you can see the text is really small here. There's a lot of lines and a lot of words. And this is actually not even the fullest list of things you could pull out of an audit. So this is a moderate, I guess this is like a 75 to 80% depth list of what an audit should look like. The first place we'd start is with a very simple summary of the account. Do you have an account we might consider large? Do we have an account you might consider as just starting out? Do you have an account that is somewhere in the middle, both in dollar amount and in number of SKUs you've got in the account? One SKU is different than 10,000. $100 is different than 10 million. And just what is the size of the business? Then we get into the inventory analysis, which we do, even though it is separate from the actual PPC, it all connects. So we'll look at, for example, the amount of sales your top SKUs are doing compared to the depth of your long tail. Do you have only 3 SKUs out of the catalog sell and everything else is 0? Or is your top 60% of your SKUs all contributing to your top line? We'll look at your buy box ratios. And that actually is a super interesting place to look, because very frequently we will identify that even if you own a brand, something like 5% of your SKUs, you don't have the buy box a significant amount of the time, and it indicates a problem. Either there's an ASIN problem in which your listing is being suppressed, so there's no buy box, or you've got hijackers that are hopping on and off, and they are affecting your percentage amount. So we simply look, what's the percentage for that? And then we go into plugging things into our systems for top level ACOS, TACOS, KPIs, KPI trends, the types of campaigns that are in an account. Are you covering every base, or are you leaving things open? What percentage of your sales come from an auto campaign versus manual targeting campaigns? What percentage of your sales comes from top of search versus other positions inside the search types? What are your campaign bidding strategies set properly? Do you have a lot of campaigns set as up and down, which is Amazon's default? If you're not careful, the setting, when you create a campaign without going deep into the settings, it starts as up and down. That is not the place where you should be running almost any campaign. It's very rare that a campaign is running ideally with up and down. But a lot of times we'll find many campaigns are built that way. So we identify many, many of those things. And then we try to get into strategy. Can I identify a strategy without you telling it to me? So this is the tricky part. If an account is structured well, I can look at your account and I can have a good idea of what you're trying to do. Whether you're accomplishing it, not accomplishing it, I can tell you have proper naming structures. I can tell you have campaigns organized well. I can tell whether you have everything grouped together or whether everything is separated out as we'd like to see. There's a lot that you can see. You can tell whether a person is being aggressive intentionally, whether they're being conservative intentionally, whether they follow this guy on YouTube or that person on LinkedIn, or every day they watch another video and start 2 more campaigns. You can tell, so we try to extract what we can see as what we think their strategy is. Yeah. And we diagram that. And once we think we know what their strategy is, that maybe will give us a little bit of context. And then, of course, the last part is general things that are missing. So do we think that there is room to cut things out that are not working? Do we think that there are things that you are running, that you should be running, that you aren't yet, that if you layer them in, they are easy wins? Do we think that that you have an ACOS which is too low, and it means you're not running your ads aggressively enough to capture the extra sales that might be a little bit more expensive, but really contribute to growth? There's a bunch of things we can try to extract, that we can try to find as we go through the account. And there's a whole list of those things. Yeah. Now, if you go to the next slide, what you'll see is sort of the template of what we use. So my team starts out with this template, and then they fill it in. They change the name on the top of the file. If this was if this was a review I'd be giving to you, I'd stick your logo on the left side of our logo, so it would be your logo plus ours, and here's what's going on. And if you look at the left side, you'll see that the slide deck, the pre-filled slide deck, has something like 45 slides in it. You can go deep. It actually goes even a little bit further than that if we want to get deeper. But most commonly, depending on the account we're working with, depending on the amount of issues that are there, and depending on what the brand wants out of us from their review, we typically will not need to go through all 45 pages. We might need 20 pages of data or 25 pages of data. And I imagine that most people doing audits are somewhere similar to this. I have seen audits that run into hundreds of pages, and I am generally of the opinion that you could probably lop a 0 off of it, because they are just saying everything with extra words. Yes. And I know I am not a mathematician. I am not a data scientist by trade, but I do know what the numbers mean to an account. And there are some numbers you can pull that sound fancy. They have 0.02% impact on an account, and you can dedicate a whole slide to it, but the impact is 0.02. So it's not useful. And when you want to break all those out, all you're doing is beating up the person who reads it and trying to beat them into submission.
100%.
So now that we know what an account looks like, what are the things that go into an account, now we take that and we sort of throw it all out to some extent. And if you go to the next slide, this is where I talk about that. And for all of this, for that whole page of metrics, for that 45-page slide, for all of the things I've spent time discussing, audits still fall short. All of those numbers are a snapshot that misses context. So, for example, different businesses have different purchasing models. Like I mentioned in the beginning, sometimes we work with the brand that is the manufacturer and wants a direct connection to their buyers. Sometimes I'm working with wholesalers. Sometimes I'm working with distributors, which are a step below a wholesaler. Every one of those has different factors that measure into their business, and those factors match the issues we see in an account. So if someone is a distributor, or if someone is just a reseller who's buying it from a distributor, in an account like that, their buy box percentages are typically going to be very low, because they're almost always not the sole seller of an account, of a product. So when we look at that audit and we see all of their buy boxes are like 12 to 30%, this is not something to stop all your meetings. We have to talk about this right now because we have to follow up on this audit. You're in trouble. No, this is actually a standard metric. Right. At the same time, with certain situations, just even one product not having its buy box all the time is an indicator of a huge issue. So that might be the same thing.
If it's your top seller and it's bringing in, 80% of your total revenue, but that's the product that has a 72% buy box rate. To your point, that's the problem.
Exactly. And every single other aspect has different models and factors that can affect what you're looking like and what looks okay. So the margins of a brand and the margins of products are absolutely a factor. Somebody with a very tight margin, we work with some brands that have 10% gross margins. And when 10%, it happens. Most commonly, people with 10 to 15% gross margins are licensees. So they will work with a large property that is very popular, Dora the Explorer or Frozen, or the Liver King. Pick your popular person. They'll pay a fee that is a piece of revenue to put that brand on their products. And a lot of the interest, a lot of the search volume is pre-built in.
Right.
And exchange for not having to teach people what Dora the Explorer is, you're paying for that with a percentage either of marketing, or you're paying for that with a percentage of cost of goods. So 10% is not necessarily wrong. You're saving 15 points on teaching people about the brand of your product.
That's right.
But in the end, it is still a 10-point or 15-point gross margin. We have to maneuver with that. And that's going to be different than somebody who is sourcing with the oldest model of goods costing a third of your gross sale price. Those guys are working with a completely different model. And then there is people like supplements or subscription services who are selling things that are intended to either have an enormous margin or people that have a long lifetime value, in which any part of the purchase price today does not have a real bearing on profitability of the product and profitability of the ads. And you have to look at the metrics completely differently than any of these other models.
Yeah. And I mean, this is probably the most important part that you've said so far, I think, which is that you have to, and this might be obvious to some people who are listening, but it's not necessarily obvious to the people who are auditing your account, especially if it's coming from a third party. And that's why at the beginning of this, I emphasized whoever's doing that audit needs to understand the goals of your business, the business model you have, the way that you acquire your products, how you sell them, the complexities you have in that. It's all highly specific to you, and the audit should reflect that. If not, you're just going to be looking at a bunch of red flags that don't apply to your business.
Yep, exactly. And what I did was to show an extreme example. If you move over to the next slide, I didn't do it with graphics because I did it on short notice, but the inspiration came to me. One of the brands we work with sells a product in the electronics category. Their ACOS is traditionally in the upper 30s percentage range. It goes anywhere from 37 to 45%, most commonly in those 30s. Their PPC to organic ratio is atrocious. They have to teach everybody about their product all the time. There are not enough people coming that know them already, and there are not enough strong rankings from their ads. The brand itself is typically, according to cost of goods, the brand is typically profit neutral most of the year. When I say profit neutral, they're selling, and according to the cost of goods, they're generally not losing money, but they're not making much either, which is not ideal. A business should be a profit and a money generator for you. We're not nonprofits here. Even nonprofits have profits that they just are mandated to sink back into the business, but nobody can truly lose money. Nobody can truly make zero.
Right.
So if you would look at an audit of this brand and you would have no context except downloading 7 reports, you would say, this is stale. You need to come in with a fresh approach. You need to do things differently, because whatever is happening now, there are sales, but you're not really doing anything. Now, this is where context comes in. This is a product which, in order to work properly, requires a product activation. And besides the product activation, there is a subscription service attached to it. That does not show up in cost of goods. That happens after the purchase. So imagine a cell phone, which is being given away for free. The cell phone company does not care if you buy it for free. They don't care if they lose $385 on the cost of goods. They don't care if they lose $600 on the cost of it. Because when you pay $35 a month, in 15 months, you've paid for the product itself. And in month 17 to 36 of your account, that is 88% profit.
Yeah.
It doesn't show up anywhere inside your Amazon account. And that is the case with this brand.
And there's
you would never know otherwise.
So many other examples that could be similar to this. This is a great way to look at it, though, which is that I didn't even see, I wasn't reading ahead. So I was about to interrupt you as you were going and say, and the electronics category doesn't have long-term value either. But obviously, I was missing that context of the software subscription. I think like another example, a way that you could think about this occurring in your business maybe is, let's pretend that a mattress company, a D2C mattress company, big name, they sell on their own website, they want to sell on Amazon, but they want to create some sort of exclusivity to their D2C model that's done so well for them. So they launch a brand new item. It's a new mattress. It's maybe the cheapest version that they've ever launched. That's what they sell on Amazon. The overlap and looking at that Amazon business to say, you're pricing this wrong. It's way cheaper than other products. Look, you're getting all these customers that should have bought on Casper.com or whatever website, is missing that additional context of, we created maybe a poor offer for this marketplace because we want to drive people to D2C. And is it working? You can use AMC and first party data to figure that out. But I think there are many instances where the context of the business doesn't even relate to Amazon at all. To your point, if you're a distributor, if you're selling on other channels, if you have subscriptions like this that don't take place on Amazon, you have to keep those things in mind.
Exactly. So context matters, and there's a lot of things that don't show up in those slicing and dicing of the numbers.
Yep.
So if you go to the next slide, what does it all mean? As we've said 75 times, context matters. Anything that is in that report, anything that is in that audit, absolutely needs to have the story of the brand, the story of the product, the story of the account behind it. If you don't have that context, all of the numbers are not useful. Once you do have it, you know how to interpret the numbers and you can tell how the business is doing. Typically, what ends up happening when somebody asks me for an audit, I require a call before we do the audit, and not just because I necessarily want to talk to the highest number of people possible, but because I need to have the information necessary for looking at this account. There are times where I will give a heads up to the person doing the audit and say, listen, here are 4 factors which are a little bit unusual. As you give us the little summaries of every slide, know that these are factors. In some cases, we have to interpret the data differently. In some cases, the brand or whoever the seller is will know that there's an issue already and they will have told us about it. So we're just reinforcing it. So we'll say, listen, my guy just built out all automatic campaigns. I know there's no manual campaigns, and I want to see how to do it better. So as we do the audit, I can save 16 slides, and one of the slides is going to say, here is the ratio of 99 to 0. You already know that it is confirmed in the data. And then we'll talk about keyword depth. We'll talk about search terms that are converting, that are prime opportunities to build into manual campaigns. We'll talk about wasted spend. Every flavor of wasted spend that's coming out of those auto campaigns. There might be a long tail of 22,000 keywords that have 1 click each, or there might be some keywords with 60 clicks and no sales. Each one equals 0. Those definitely tend to be addressed differently as part of your account. So knowing the context lets us look at the brand and the audit better. So
is it death by 1,000 cuts, or is it, a few bleeders at the top that are causing your wasted spend to balloon? I love that. And I think, the point about having a call with whoever's going to do the audit is also important. I was at a conference a few weeks ago, ran into a friend who manages a big brand. He works internal, and he's like, hey, I want you to audit our account. Like, just check out what our agency's doing. I said, sure. We talked for 15 minutes in person, took some notes, get access to the account. Within 5 minutes, I'm like, okay, I need more context into what's going on in this business. We schedule a call. We're going to talk and actually get the audit done. But you need to know a lot about, who are your customers, which products are being emphasized, what works, what doesn't, what do you already know, what have you told the agency to do versus what you think they're doing. All very important. But I want to, in the last couple of minutes here, Abe, I wanted to see, what does this all mean for the brands that are listening today? Obviously, they can come to you for an audit, maybe. They could come to me for an audit. We'd be, happy to have that conversation. But if they want to look at their own business this way before, somebody else comes and tells them what the opportunity is, where should they start?
The best place to start is by investing $30 or $50 into one of the many tools which will break down things at a per SKU level. Most people don't use any tool at all for looking at their accounts. The tools are not expensive. There are people who do it for free. There are tools which are $30 or $50 a month, and you don't even have to make a commitment past the first month. As soon as you plug it in, you're going to have data differently. So the things you want to look at is data on a per SKU basis. This is number one. And from there, you want to have in mind, what is the goal of your brand? You want to have an idea of where you think you are and where you want to get to. And then you want to look at a few key metrics to see if you are where you want to be. So one metric we look at is very simply units per month. So, are you selling as much as you want to? Are you not selling as much as you want to? That is square one. And if you look at it on a per unit basis, that is different than looking at it on a top level basis for the account. The next thing you're going to look at is impressions. Is your product being shown to a lot of shoppers as they visit through the Amazon ecosystem? After that, you're going to look at your ACOS. The ACOS is the ratio of spend to ad sales. And then you'll look at TACOS, which is the ratio of spend to your overall sales. Are you spending too much to acquire those sales? Are you maybe not spending a lot at all to acquire those sales, which suggests you're leaving something on the table?
Yeah.
Once you have that first idea, then you can dig into the next level of things, which is a click-through rate. That is super important. The click-through rate identifies whether the product that you sell matches the searches that people are doing where your product shows up. And if you don't match there, this connects to a lot of issues.
Right.
After that, the next thing is your conversion rate. The people that get to your page, the people that click, are they going through to buy your product? And if they are coming to your page but not buying your product, that is another major issue. So, do enough people see your ad in the first place? Are you good enough of an option for them to come to your product page? Once they come to your product page, are they purchasing?
Yeah.
Then you can get into an individual keyword or a group of keywords or a core term or a long tail. All that is separate. But at the core, you want to know simply, do you fit the Amazon path for a shopper? If a
100%.
person goes to Amazon and they type a search, do you fit in the path? If you fit in the path, your numbers will typically be good, if not excellent. And if you don't fit the path, the numbers will show it and you have to start diagnosing. The place you don't fit will be different in every situation. You might be close, you might be way off.
Right.
There's a lot of factors there to get into at the deep level, but at the simplest level, somebody looking at things that doesn't want to get too sophisticated, or at least needs the starting point to know how bad things are, those are the places to start. The 3, 4, 5 metrics that are the most important.
100% agree. And I'll say, my process for doing an audit internally at a brand, which is almost identical to what you just said, Abe, but probably going to say it with different words, is start at the ASIN level view or the SKU level view, like you mentioned. That is definitely the most important part. And that's also going to be one of the challenging parts, is aggregating all of your metrics at the ASIN level. So you need to see ad spend across all ad types at the ASIN level. You want to see ad clicks and ad impressions all rolled up to that ASIN level. You want to see your business metrics, ideally including things like inventory at FBA and inventory fees on those products at the ASIN level. As much of that as you can bring together. You can start small with just ad spend and ad clicks, and then ultimately start adding all of the other fees. But reviewing it at the ASIN level is the right way to do it. That way you can then look at the ratios that are important, like ad spend at the ASIN level compared to total sales. Why am I only spending 1% of my total ads budget on my bestseller instead of 20%? What is the ratio of organic sessions to the product page instead of ad driven sessions? So I think starting at that ASIN level view with all the metrics is definitely a good place to go. Add to it as you go, but make sure that the core pieces of the Amazon business, the search volume, you're showing up, you're getting the click to your product detail page, and you're getting the conversion. Like Abe said, if you get those 3 pieces right, obviously you're cruising.
Yeah, or at least you have getting them right is the key, but knowing knowing how you're doing with those is the key to at least being on the right direction.
Definitely. Well, thank you, Abe, for all of your time and putting this together today. I think this was great. Account audits are one of my favorite things to do when in the Amazon space. I love just like opening up a new account, trying to figure out the pattern of what's going on. So this is always a fun discussion.
Yeah, it was definitely more interesting than the word audit might suggest.
Yes. If you guys, Abe, what's the process for asking you and your team to do an audit? Do you do them for everybody, or what's the requirement there?
Oh yeah, I'll do them for everybody. Like I said, I would love to have the first conversation where we see where you are and where you want to be. From there, it does lead to an account review, and I'm happy to discuss accounts with people. One of the things that makes me so much happier than the first 25 years of being in business is that since I opened up the agency, I get the reward of helping troubleshoot accounts, and it really is rewarding. So I like helping people in general. Um, if it leads to a relationship, it's fine. If it's just the hello, take a look at this, it's absolutely fine. Also, it's always a learning experience all around.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Abe. We appreciate your time. If anybody has questions for him, connect with Abe on LinkedIn. He posts great content all the time, so you don't want to miss it. And we will see you hopefully on the next IntentWise Connect webinar. So thank you, everybody who joined. If you have any feedback for us on how we do these, feel free to email me or also connect with me on LinkedIn. And feel free to share the recording. It'll be live on the site immediately as I hit the end stream button, so you can share that with any of your colleagues who couldn't make it.
Yes, sir.
All right.
All right, Ryan. Thanks for having me, man. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Abe. It's been a pleasure. I will
Yes.
talk to you soon.